I've toyed with the idea of making this list, but considering the fact that I almost vomited any time I thought about saying something positive about Lorgar, I put it off. I'm over it now, let's get into it. This is where I think each Primarch would stack up in terms of pure dueling ability. The last time I made a list like this was how I felt about the Primarchs overall in terms of their ability to lead their legions. This list is going to compare how I feel about the Primarchs' ability to beat, choke, stab, and hammer each other to death. Essentially, I'm going to take each of the Primarchs and put them into various tiers the way I did before, only this time I'm going to be a little bit more organized about it and actually script it, instead of just turning on my camera and ranting about how much of a moron I think Fulgrim is. Just like last time, I'm going to start with the First Legion to work my way onwards, but I'm also going to include what happened after the Primarchs turned and went into the Eye of Terra. So in short, I'm going to do a really full listing here. Be aware these opinions are mine and based off my knowledge of the lore as it stands as of the day I release this, and things could change based off what happens in subsequent lore. In order to make this list, I'm going to consider each Primarch with their particular talent intact, and while my tier ranking might not surprise you, my overall ranking of the Primarchs might just. And again, don't be offended if I don't give your Primarch the rank or tier you think they deserve. Grab some popcorns, kick back, and let's go. The Lion exists at Ultra Instinct and is basically the perfect hunter. While he's about as socially adept as a plank of wood, he's unnaturally amazing at figuring out a battlefield. This makes him a ridiculously good general, but these abilities combined with the fact that he spent the better part of his life fighting creatures of the warp while being trained by people who have been fighting said creatures for thousands of years makes the Lion a fighter that isn't going to have many equals based on experience alone. Couple all of this with the fact that all of his character creation points were diverted away from social skills and shunted directly into skills that made him a better fighter, and, well, there you go. He's an impressive strategist for a social brick, and it's even more impressive if he can be as socially awkward as he is while at the same time being able to glance at a battle map and come up with a better battle strategy than most generals could if they spent decades trying. This instinctive ability to understand a combat situation coupled with years of hunting, added on to years of training and pure physical ability, make him the easiest S+ tier duelist it's barely worth talking about. That is his superpower, and every Primarch has one. The Lion's abilities know at first glance how to whoop that ass. He has a simply uncanny ability to understand what's going on around him, which most people would call paranoia, but it's not really paranoia when they're out to get you. His ability to read situations and act on them quickly was so well honed that even people who could see the future couldn't predict what he was going to do. Case in point, when he fought Konrad Curze without distractions, he outdueled the Primarch of the 8th Legion even though Konrad could see every move he was going to make before he made it. The Lion's solution to this was to change every swing and thrust in mid-strike based purely off instinct. Easy S+ tier. No doubts in my mind. Name a Primarch he's fought that he hasn't beaten. I'll wait. Konrad Curze? Put him in a coma. Russ? Put him to sleep. And no, I don't care if Russ says he wasn't really fighting seriously. Now let's talk about the Lindsay Lohan of the 40k lexicon, Fulgrim. Pre-heresy Fulgrim was a perfectionist, and it showed in just about everything he tried to do, whether it be art, warfare, leadership, music, perfection, looks, perfection. Maybe he's born with it, it's definitely not Maybelline. Fulgrim's martial abilities follow along this route. Every strike he makes, perfect. His defense, perfect. There's a problem with perfection though, and it's the fact there's no real art in it. That's something that Fulgrim pre-heresy never really understood, and in fact it got told to him before Fulgrim went really off the deep end by a sculptor named Ossian Delafor. Ossian Delafor was reviewing sculptures that Fulgrim had made of his captains and found them devoid of life and passion. Even though they were absolutely perfect, they lacked anything that could have made them more. Fulgrim, pre-heresy, gets a solid B rating as a duelist, but he never get higher than that. He lacks the inspiration and martial drive and instincts of his brothers, while also lacking the tankiness, stamina, and durability that could push him higher. At the end of the day, it's not the guy who does everything right that comes out on top, it's the guy that learns from mistake after mistake. Fulgrim could practice until his arm fell off, but there would be a limit to how high he could go because of his own inability to get over his own need for perfection. In fact, I can say with absolute certainty that Fulgrim could practice and train for 10,000 years, while other Primarchs like Curze and the Lion hung strapped up by their feet in a dungeon, and the second either one of them got loose, they would beat Fulgrim within an inch of his life. I'm saying that this is somebody who strangled an avatar of Cain to death with their bare hands. Fulgrim post-Mean Girls lost all that pre-heresy dedication to being awesome and just went with sensation. If anything, he's the only Primarch I can say that actually got worse after his ascension, because after he went to rehab, he went all heretical, and he would easily lose focus on what he was doing for sensation's sake. Fulgrim got clapped so hard by Dorn it was almost comical, and Dorn was someone that Fulgrim should have at the very least challenged. Fulgrim in snake form gives a C rating at absolute best, and no, I'm not reconsidering that. Alpharius actually challenged Dorn more, and Alpharius was the smallest Primarch with the least physical strength. Perturabo is an absolute monster in every way, and I mean that. His primary ability was the ability to figure out how things were made, and more specifically how to unmake them, and strategy. But if you're looking for what would make him a monster fight in close quarters, it would be that the man exists at a state of control and restrained hatred the likes of which that could spawn supernovas. Combine that with his particular gift, and Perturabo is fully capable of taking down almost anyone. In short, if Perturabo decides you're going to catch the hands, you're going to catch the hands. Even Angron in Demon Prince form came up short against the Lord of Iron because Perturabo had figured out how to make Angron's patron deity get bored with the fight for long enough that Angron himself was too weak to fight back. Perturabo is the kind of guy who will happily beat that ass with a game of Hungry Hippos, just because it was the closest thing to hand. At one point he showed Fulgrim a model he had been making with microscopic gears that had taken the Primarch a long time to produce. A working model of a Warhound Titan. It even had steam! He then used it to beat the Primarch of the Third to a bloody pulp for being a sneaky bastard. Perturabo gets a solid S rating from me, and it's well deserved, frankly. Purdy is insanely durable, almost Mortarion levels of durable, with the ability to think 17 moves ahead and figure out how to break an opponent down mathematically, while at the same time throwing more salt than Mortons. Post-Heresy Purdy does not really change that much in my opinion, so he catches a solid S rating overall. The Khan is the roast master general of the Primarchs, and his ability to layeth the smacketh down verbally is without a doubt one of his finest qualities. He's also the fastest in terms of physical speed, even faster than Corvus Corax. The Khan has meth head speed. While he's a ridiculously good fighter based off his natural ability, he's also staggeringly durable, able to keep fighting even though he's about to drop dead literally. The Khan stood up and took everything that Demon Prince Mortarion had to dish out and still beat him, even though Mortarion exists as a complete counter to everything the Khan is in terms of fighting style. Mortarion should have never, ever lost that fight to Jaghatai Khan, but because of all the intangibles Jaghatai brings to the table, he won anyway. What are those intangibles? The Khan went to the Muhammad Ali school of trash talk, and he does it regularly and to great effect. That's not what boosts him, it's the fact that he can actually back it up. He straight up laughed in Fulgrim's face when Fulgrim said that he could beat him in a fight, and I think that if Fulgrim had gotten mad and tried to force the issue, the Khan would have spanked him brutally. I'm not even joking when I say that the Khan is easily one of the top 3 most naturally gifted fighters the Primarchs have in their ranks, but that's where all the upsides end. The Khan is a naturally gifted fighter, but he does not have any superhuman abilities that help, aside from being crackhead fast. Allegedly. When Jaghatai Khan and Magnus were talking, Jaghatai told Magnus he didn't have any psychic gifts. Magnus raised an eyebrow back at him, as if he was saying, yeah, whatever, bitch. I give the Khan a solid A ranking, but if he comes back with a webway with precognition or any other gifts that his brothers have, it's gonna be an S overnight. Time to piss a few people off. Leman Russ is nowhere near as strong or capable as he thinks he is. In fact, Leman Russ has not once beaten a single one of his brothers without outside help. Yes, he fought Horus to a standstill, doing it while using a weapon containing a portion of the Emperor's own power. Russ got laid out cold by the Lion, and people who comment that saying that Russ, quote, wasn't taking the fight personally, can remember that apparently it annoyed the Six so bad that they would gladly interrupt meetings between Primarchs to satisfy their honor, because of their Primarch being KO'd by the Lion. You don't really do something like that and have that much prickish energy about it if it was something you were laughing off. Screw that rationalization. Russ fought Angron too and lost, but again, apparently he was holding back to teach Angron a lesson. In more realistic terms, he showed up and tried to throw his weight around. All he managed to do was pick a fight with Angron and lose, only to get bailed out by his legion, and then claim the equivalent of a moral victory when Angron was about to put an axe in his face. Let's also put this solidly to bed. Anyone that says Leman Russ beat Magnus the Red in single combat is an abject denial. Russ threw everything he had at Magnus while Magnus was fighting to protect his remaining 1,000 sons. Russ was devoting all of his attention to Magnus while Magnus himself was fighting Russ, killing custodians, massacring Wolfen and Space Wolves, and killing Russ's pet wolves. Several times in this fight, Magnus could have killed Russ if he wasn't having to deal with something else other than putting Russ down. In fact, the only reason Russ won was because he lashed out at complete random after Magnus wounded him, and he wound up blinding Magnus in the process. Russ is fast and strong. This is all very true, but he is nowhere near as good a duelist as Space Wolf fanboys want him to be, and he believes himself to be. Final ranking, B tier. I'm not saying he's bad, but he's had way too many people saying he's better than he actually is. Now we get to the Imperial Fist, Rogal Dorn. Rogal Dorn is an absolute Chad. While I've seen too many people upsell Leman Russ as a fighter, I've seen more than enough downsell Dorn. Dorn is a brick in all ways, and his abilities as a duelist are no different. He's a stiff, tough fighter, durable enough to tank blows and strong enough to dish them out. He was the first loyalist to kill a traitor in the form of Alpharius. And while Alpharius was the smallest and physically weakest of the Primarchs, that is actually saying something. Dorn's primary abilities come in the form of strategic thinking, however. Dorn has shown on several occasions he's willing to take hits to win, and he's durable enough to survive an absolutely brutal beating at the hands of Konrad Curze. His biggest downsides come from the fact that he lacks some of the supernatural-like abilities that some of his other brothers have. He doesn't have the speed of the Khan, or the stealth of Corax, but he makes up for this with stubborn resilience and trained ability. I give him a solid B tier as a duelist, and I am happy with that. I can hear the Prophet of the 8th Legion squealing in delight in the comments section because I know that he knows that I'm about to talk about Konrad Curze, the Night Haunter. To call the Night Haunter a monster is underselling it entirely. Konrad Curze is nuttier than squirrel shit and has absolutely no fear of death whatsoever, primarily because he's seen the future. It's almost unfair to call Curze a duelist, and it's completely inaccurate to call him a strategist. Konrad Curze often does what he does for the fucking lulz, mainly because he can see the future. While he does lack in durability, he's stronger than the average overall, and his fighting style and other abilities more than make up for it. Konrad Curze is a monstrously powerful duelist, with even Sanguinius wondering if he will be able to actually take the Night Hunter on, and Corax nervous about fighting him one-to-one on Istvan. In fact, the only Primarch that actually was comfortable fighting him was the Lion. Curze uses any advantage he can get and uses psychological warfare in the same way that most people breathe, and if not for a lot of shenanigans, he would have led the kill count for Primarchs killing the heresy at 3, those 3 being the Lion, Guilliman, and Vulkan. Aside from his unconventional and largely unpredictable fighting style, Curze can look into the future mid-fight like it's a muscle reflex, where most people would knock over a vase and see how it's going to fall. Curze would look into the future, see the vase fall over, see how the pieces will shatter, and know exactly where to place himself so he can take a piece out of the air to use as a weapon before he's in the room with the vase. He does this with absolutely zero effort, and can do it in mid-flight, mid-fall, mid-fight. Konrad Curze is a natural predator, with all the tools and tactics of one, and gets a solid S rating from me. Konrad Curze came closer to killing more Primarchs than any other Primarch in the history of Primarching. Also, almost beating Rogal Dorn to death with his bare hands before the Horus Heresy even kicked off. I am contractually and morally obligated to instantly give Sanguinius the S+ rating because come on, man. In fact, the only reason that Angron was recruited by Horus was because that Horus thought that he might be able to take Sanguinius, and he wanted some insurance. Not only did Sanguinius have the same foresight as Curze, he also had literal wings, which gave him an entirely different angle to fighting. I'm not even going to mention the fact he held the Eternity Gate almost entirely alone for literal days during the Siege of Terra because it's absolutely absurd. He, after this, managed to kill a fully formed bloodthirster of Khorne in single combat as well as an Eldar Titan. Sanguinius is quite literally OP in almost every way, and I'm not even kidding. If you took a poll of all the other Primarchs on who was the best fighter, Sanguinius was at the top of every list. But if you want an idea of how I flat out know Sanguinius was an absolute beast, it comes from Leman Russ. You see, Russ was really prone of telling everyone he could and would whoop that ass for a Klondike bar, and he had a massively inflated opinion of his own abilities. But there was only one Primarch that Russ flat out and adamantly declared would stomp him out, and that Primarch was Sanguinius. When you are so good that you never have to show it, and the biggest blowhard in the galaxy isn't taking potshots at you behind your back, you know you're the best. Ferrus Manus is a humble guy, and that's why I like him. He's gruff and factual, and he's not worried about looking the absolute best at everything imaginable like some of the other Primarchs. That being said, he's far from the best duelist. In all honesty, the only things that we know about Ferrus, we know about because of the only Primarch he actually fought, which was Fulgrim. And while he did hold his own against Fulgrim, it was always clear who the winner between the two of them would be. This is another one of the Primarchs that I'm giving a low rating, not because I don't like them, but because their skills are inclined toward a different area of warfare. His were more mechanically inclined than actual physicality. Ferrus gets a C rating, and I think if he were here to see it, he'd both understand and admit that it was right. Now we get to Angron, and it's really not even a question for me, is it a question for you? Angron is a terrifying fighter, even before he became a Demon Primarch. Angron literally did not care about his own life. This was both a blessing and a curse considering how he viewed his existence. Angron almost killed Russ, and Angron would have killed Guilliman if Guilliman wasn't protected by a Baneblade thickness and plot armor. He was strong enough to literally lift a Warhound Titan's foot off Lorgar, and durable as hell, not to mention so naturally skilled it was frightening. Other Space Marines had a reverence for their Primarchs, but when it came to Angron, they viewed him as destruction incarnate. Again, this is before Cornbull gave him wings. After his ascension, he became, well, Angron squared. Double the rage, double the power, durability, speed, and insanity. Angron in Demon Primarch form gets a solid S ranking from me, an A ranking before his ascension, and in the list of Primarchs that could take him down one-on-one after his ascension, you only have a few names. Guilliman, although he suffers from Plautus armoris and extrema, a rare genetic disorder, is in reality more of a general than a warrior, and it shows. It was known by both him and over half the Primarchs he met that he was not as good of a fighter as they were, but this isn't knocking him yet again. Guilliman knew his strengths and could play to them well. Despite the tonnage of plot armor he was surrounded with, it was clear to most readers where he'd actually fall in line. The Lion made it clear that Guilliman would and could catch an absolute ass-whipping. Curze made him look flat-out silly. Guilliman also had problems with Lorgar of all Primarchs, but I do believe he would have won against Lorgar in the end. Him being able to hold out for any length of time against Demon Prince Angron and Lorgar is at the same time suspect. Like I said, Guilliman knew his strengths and knew them well, and frankly I can't fault him for that. Guilliman, since his reanimation, has lost against both Fulgrim and Mortarion, but again, this takes nothing away from Guilliman. Guilliman is just simply not a duelist or a fighter of any type. He is a general. He ranks as a solid C as a duelist. He's not going to rank any higher in my book. It's worth saying that he almost lost a one-on-one with Corferon. Mortarion, on the other hand, is so ungodly pathetic in my opinion, you honestly can't get much lower than him unless your name starts with an L. His primary dueling ability seems to be how hard and how many times he can get hit over and over again on repeat. Insane durability does have its place, and he's really good with his scythe and always has been, but at the end of the day, Mortarion isn't nearly known as much for his martial ability as he is known for being able to tank an absurd amount of damage. Mortarion's ranking reflects this, even though he stood toe-to-toe with the Khan before his ascension. Before he was forced to withdraw, the best I can give pre-ascension is B+. And that comes after the fact that if the durability of Primarchs was rated from 1 to 10, Mortarion would get a 15. After his ascension, the Primarch of the Death Guard only got more durability with the damage over time in his area, and it's downright sickening when you consider the first time he revealed himself after his ascension, you had Space Marines puking their guts out from the smell of him. Angron's ascension gave him even more strength and berserker rage. Fulgrim's ascension gave him more hands to hold drugs with, but Mortarion got dunked in the worst sewage dump ever and grew wings. Post-ascension Mortarion only upgrades to A after the ascension because he was even more emotionally vulnerable after his ascension than he was before. Magnus the Red's entire rating is going to be based off the only Primarch versus Primarch fight that he was in for an extended period of time. It goes without saying I'm going to talk about the Battle of Prospero and Magnus against Russ. Let me make it clear, if it was just Magnus and just Russ would have been so insanely overmatched it would have been almost comical. In fact, it would have been downright hilarious. Magnus not only held his own against Russ, Magnus almost killed him and did this with one eye. He was also holding off an entire army while he was doing this. Russ's win against Magnus came directly as a result of a swing of Russ's going wild after Magnus had wounded him. The ability of Magnus to manage this fight was downright impressive, and he lasted longer than most Primarchs managed to do against another Primarch while holding back an army at the same time. For this, I have to give Magnus a solid A+ rating, bordering on S. And I have to say, a fight between Russ and Magnus fought on equal footing would have been absolutely disastrously one-sided in the favor of Magnus. Once Sinch took Magnus and turned him into a murder pigeon, he's an easy S. Horus. What to say about Horus? Horus was widely respected as a good fighter, but before the heresy everyone had high opinions of him, which is more than what can be said about every other Primarch but Sanguinius because everyone loves the Golden Hawk Boy. Russ was of the opinion that he was as good of a fighter as Horus, but considering Russ's opinions of his own abilities, it stands to reason that Horus would have been in the upper half of his brothers in sheer capability. Russ would have been an easy A because of this alone. What we really don't know is how powerful Horus is at the end of the heresy itself. We know he mortally wounded the Emperor, or we think we did, and he killed Sanguinius, but we're gonna have to wait to the last book of the series on that one. On the other hand, it can be argued that the Emperor didn't want to kill Horus and only got serious in the last few seconds of the fight, and that Sanguinius had just literally been fighting for months and had put down a bloodthirster of Khorne, which is basically one of the strongest things in existence. Even then, the sheer fact he managed to actually hurt the Emperor gives him so massive of an S+, it's not even worth speaking any further about. If he actually did it at all. Lorgar is Lorgar tier. What else is there to say? Lorgar got hard-L'd by anyone and everyone. Corvus Corax absolutely brutalized him on the fields of Istvan and only was stopped from killing him by Konrad Curze. I will now say something positive about Lorgar, so brace yourselves. Lorgar is the Leman Russ of the traitors, with the only difference being that Lorgar actually knows he can't fight worth a shit. Vulkan is a hard one for me, and you're going to be surprised at the end of the day. Vulkan is the largest and arguably the strongest of the Primarchs, and he has demonstrable ability when it comes to fighting. The one thing that is clear and utterly noticeable is that while he has an ability, he's not renowned for it. I already hear Russ fans saying, well, Russ was? Well, no, he wasn't. No one mentioned that Leman Russ would be unleashed. They said the wolves would be unleashed. That's a key difference. When gauging Vulkan, we have a huge pool of fighting to draw from. He defended the Emperor against Magnus, although, to be honest, it was nowhere near a long fight. He fought Konrad Curze in an undetermined amount of times, losing almost all of them. At the end of the day, just like Ferrus Manus, Guilliman, and Lorgar, Vulkan is not known for his martial ability as much as other professions. Vulkan gets a C rating as a duelist, and I am more than comfortable saying this. Corvus Corax, on the other hand, is more than well known for his combat ability, and his relentless stalking of Lorgar is both a delight to children of all ages and hilarious to adults. Corvus is specialized in delivering surprise ass-whippings, and is more than capable to hurt feelings on a mass scale. Curze actually looked forward to fighting Corvus to test himself, but Corvus knew better than to fight Curze, which means that Corvus knows well enough not to mess with certain types of crazy. Add into that Corvus' nearly insane abilities to blend into the background, literally becoming a shadow to the point where some of his brothers thought it was warp-induced. Since the Horus heresy, Corvus has returned to monkey bird style and is tracking Lorgar down through the warp, even though it hasn't really helped him in the long run. Corvus has been twisted into something, different. Lorgar is constantly on the verge of finding out why a flock of crows is called the murder. And I can call Corvus an easy A rating, with his altered form definitely cracking guess. But we'd have to see Corvus laying the hands of someone to fully understand these days. Alpharius, he's another I don't feel comfortable giving a rating to, and I don't like talking trash about him, but I honestly have to. Alpharius isn't a bad fighter, he is just the size of one of his brother's kids. Comparing Alpharius' abilities to other Primarchs is almost unfair at the end of the day when you look at it from a martial standpoint. Once again, we're not looking at a Primarch known for their martial ability. Alpharius' main strength is destabilization and infiltration, and managing the type of spy and intelligence networks that would make the KGB and the CIA at their best look like kittens in wet paper bags. Alpharius did have the ability to hold Dorn for a bit, and it can be argued he might have hurt or killed Dorn, but Dorn himself was willing to tank a shot just to land a killing shot on the Primarch of the Alpha Legion. Again, not a slam on the Primarch, just an honest assessment. And that honest assessment gives him a C overall. Compared with other Primarchs, he lacks in size and overall strength. And while he could make up for that in speed, the speed he is shown to have does not make up for the lacking of the other two. Now that I've ranked the Primarchs, how about another bonus list? Here you go, my ranking of the Primarchs by number. I'm ranking them not because of their most optimistic set, but the most pessimistic. So keep that in mind when going forward, because it's important. At number 24, I have Lorgar, because fuck Lorgar. Coming up after Lorgar at 23, I have to slot Alpharius in because no matter what I say or do, I can't get past the obvious problems he would have in fighting pretty much anyone on this list from a simple standpoint of physical prowess. He is simply not the physical threat that most of his brothers are, and he was treated as such by almost all of the traitor Primarchs, so it shouldn't surprise anyone that I put him here. In the next slot up, I really have to insult my own appearance because no matter how much I look like Ferrus Manus, he would get put into a casket by literally everyone else. I'm being generous by saying he'd take down Alpharius. Again, it's not a slam on him, it's just stating my opinion. I already know that down in the comments section I've irritated someone already who thinks that just because I'm saying their favorite Primarch would take an L, it means I think that Primarch sucks. That's not the case. If this was an invention competition, Ferrus would take first place. But this is not an invention competition. This is a fight to the death. Now let's generate some real salt. Guilliman is well within the bottom 5 for me, because with the exception of one time where he supposedly was able to fight against 2 Primarchs at the same time, mainly because the writers wanted Guilliman on the same planet, and then they had to find a way to write themselves out of a corner, well, Guilliman has taken a hard L against anyone else he's fought. I don't care if the best administration generalship Primarch had to deal and survive against the embodiment of Rip and Tear and Angron, and somehow you think that should make him a better fighter. The writers put him in that corner and had to write him out. He's also the only Primarch on this listing that seemed to have a problem with less than a company of Space Marines, considering the Alpha Legion almost assassinated him. And yes, before anyone says anything else, Angron killed over 40 elite Eldar warriors when he was a naked toddler. Again, if I were talking about another category besides one-on-one, he'd rank a lot higher for me. But again, here we are. Number 20 is Snake Fulgrim, and I don't care if he's a greater demon of Slaanesh. Fulgrim is the literal worst. Dorn clapped him so hard it was downright laughable and almost wound up on Pornhub. Perturabo slapped him around, missing half his soul. There's nothing about Ascended Fulgrim that makes him a better fighter. In fact, he is much worse than he used to be. Number 19 is Leman Russ. Russ only talks a good fight. His estimation of his own abilities comes from how much people fear his legion, but not him. But any chance he got to prove that he was as good as he said he was, he utterly failed at. And I can already hear the howls as people slam their fingers on their keyboards in rage, saying he lost the lion because he was laughing and not taking the fight seriously after actually sucker punching the lion. That's not a good defense. Saying he lost on purpose to Angron to teach him a lesson when he picked the fight in the first place is also not a good defense, especially when anyone with a shred of common sense would know that Angron gave less than 2 shits about his legion and being a good general. Saying you're right because Lorgar said that Russ threw the fight to teach Angron a lesson is heresy, and considering the source of that revelation that you're citing as a proper source for information, I'm gonna have to send the Inquisition to ask you a few questions. Leman Russ is the drunk frat boy of the Primarchs who drinks one too many Mike's Hard Lemonades and automatically starts claiming he can whip the ass end off the Western world. The reality of the situation is the only reason he was so feared was because his legion would show up if you pissed Dad off, and Dad was gonna send help of his own. A lot of help in some cases. Fulgrim is barely above, and I mean barely above Russ at the end of the day. Almost everyone above Fulgrim in this list has something Fulgrim utterly lacks, and that's a passion for what they are doing in one way or another. Fulgrim's only concern was the perfect attack and the perfect defense, which left his entire approach cold and sterile. In fact, the only difference between Fulgrim pre-ascension and post-ascension was the fact that Russ would utterly clap Fulgrim's snake form, while pre-snake Fulgrim I really think could take the Wolf King. The difference is discipline, something Fulgrim had but his ascendant self completely lacks. So yes, while I say that Fulgrim could beat Russ pre-snake, the second he grew another set of arms and switched his mobility methods, Fulgrim's ability to concentrate for more than 3 seconds on an actual issue turns him into a pelt for Russ. Waddling his way into 17th place is Mortarion. He tanks his way in there, and here's why. Mortarion's only redeeming factor is the fact he can face tank damage that would kill another Primarch 5 times over without flinching. The fact he's next to unkillable creates a problem for anyone trying to fight him, because given enough time they're going to start to slow down. And the second they are slow enough for Mortarion to effectively swing at them is the second they start having an incredible amount of issues. Mortarion is nothing more or less than a Dark Souls boss played on normal difficulty. If you're off your game and slow down, you will wind up getting wrecked, but as long as you can stay quick on your feet and pay attention to the first rule of the zombie apocalypse, you should be fine. By the way, rule number 1 is cardio. Coming in at 16th is Dorn. He's currently fortifying this position. Dorn is a brick tank that's a brilliant fighter, but his strength lies in strategy more than personal combat. Dorn could and would easily slap chop anyone below him on this list except Mortarion, because even though Storm's Teeth is powerful, Mortarion is a chunky boy. I still say at the end Dorn wins because Dorn could tank what Mortarion could put out, and eventually Mortarion couldn't tank what Dorn would be putting out. Dorn is a practiced and stoic fighter, and that's been proven time and time again, and he's also wise enough to know who he is and isn't going to be able to stomp out. 15th on this list goes Corax, and the only reason he is not a lot higher is because while he's a monstrously good fighter, he mostly relies on stealth and striking from the shadows, which puts him at an almost gargantuan disadvantage against anyone that has precognitive abilities, is named Lion, or can tank the insane amount of burst damage that Corax is gonna do. We know that Corax fought a few other brothers, but none of those fights either help or hurt him, because we really don't know how they went. Saying that Corax pimp slapped Lorgar to the point where I was crying laughing doesn't really help because it's Lorgar. So really anybody higher on this list has a singular ability that Corax himself simply does not have enough of to counter. Corax is quite possibly in the top 3 straight up fighters in this entire list, disregarding specialized abilities behind Sanguinius and the Khan if I was gauging this by a different method. My 14th slot goes to pre-heresy Horus, and I have a load of good reasons for this. For one, most everyone simply assumed Horus was an amazing fighter without much really to back it up, so it was more a reputation thing than any real evidence. A solid reputation can go a long way, but it doesn't go that far with me. I think a fight between pre-heresy Horus and Corvus Corax would have been extremely evenly matched, with me not really being able to decide between the two, but I give the slight edge to Horus because even Corvus said he was a better fighter. Saying that he lost to a chaos-corrupted man with an anatheme does not count against him, because a ferret with an anatheme and the opportunity to use it could kill anyone. Saying that everyone thought he was a great fighter doesn't count for him anyway, because I couldn't find any records of sparring or fights he was in with his brothers that would tell me anything different. The only thing I have to go about this is his brother's opinion of him, so he goes in the 14th slot. Right about in the middle. 13th goes to Angron, and for a really good reason. Angron is brutally strong and fast, and is an utter chad when it comes to taking damage at a rate that would make even Mortarion flinch. Without a care in the world, I can say Mortarion wouldn't just beat anyone before him on this list, he'd outright destroy them, with the exception of probably Corvus Corax. Angron is easily in the top 5 of the most durable Primarchs, considering he got stepped on by a Warhound, easily in the top 3 overall in strength behind Vulkan, and possibly the Lion because he just shoved the foot of the Warhound off of him, and he is no way lacking when it comes to personal speed. The only real deficiency he has is in tactical thought. Angron has the personality of a honey badger and the subtlety of a chainsaw. We all know what he's there to do. Number 12 overall is the Khan, and I know and I should get pushback about this one, but hear me out. Jaghatai Khan is an absolute hot rod of pure meth head speed and gets all the style points in the world. The Khan knows how to talk shit and back it up, and is without a single doubt in my mind one of the best straight fighters in the entire conversation. The Khan's entire fighting style emphasizes his greatest advantages, and he employs them to whoop that ass while doing some banging Mongolian throat singing. But when it's all said and done, I think he loses to the rest of this list for a myriad of reasons, and it's not because he isn't a better fighter overall. It would all come down to what those Primarchs do or have that is better than Jaghatai Khan's own insane abilities. The fact I can't put the Khan into the top 10 hurts my damn feelings. Number 11 is Ascended Mortarion, and this one actually really hurts my feelings. He's only in this position because he's the ultimate brick tank that smells like the ass end of a dead rhinoceros. Any fight he gets into is about to be a one-on-one because no one else wants to be around it. He makes right guard turn left, speed stick slow down, sure question everything, and secret tell all. His ascension only gave him a smell that was a war crime, and even more durability than he had before. He actually beat the Khan the second time he fought him, but overall Mortarion took the L between them because the Khan inflicted such severe emotional trauma that it was just staggering. If this list was on how good of a shit talker someone was, the Khan would challenge the God Emperor. Breaking into the top 10, we now have to talk about Perturabo. He's an absolute monster truck of pure bitterness. Perturabo has done things that are downright obscene when it boils down to it, but some of the most telling things are how the other Primarchs had reacted when he does something brutal. The best example I have for this is when Fulgrim got a really good look at a model Perturabo was building, and then showed him how great the woodwork was on his desk. In other words, Fulgrim got insta-clapped and didn't do anything back for a while. Perturabo has silverback gorilla strength for a Primarch, and the speed to match, and on top of that he's as durable as all hell. So why do I put him at the 10th spot? I'm putting him here because I've gauged each Primarch on my lowest expectation of them, and not my highest. If I were to rank them based off where they could be if XYZ happened, Perturabo would be ranked second. Perturabo is the Tony Stark, the Batman, the Sherlock Holmes of 40k aside from his other qualities. If you are stupid enough to allow Perturabo the time to prepare, you're screwed, unless he's written like an idiot. His ascended form really doesn't change much, so he stays at that number 10 spot. The number 9 slot is owned by magical Magnus, and anyone who didn't see him in the top 10 is delusional, and we still have another version of him to go. Magnus is nowhere near as durable as most of the other Primarchs, but in terms of pure power, he's close to unbelievable. And this was before he started drinking Zinchbull and got wings. Magnus held off an entire Space Marine Legion, thousands of Imperial Army, Custodians, Sisters of Silence, and a myriad of mutated Astartes, while engaging in intense hand-to-hand combat with 2 warp-sized wolf hybrids the size of Alpharius and another Primarch, and was actually holding his ground. This is an absolute monster of an individual, and I can't say enough about it. Even if the Primarch he was holding back was Lorgar, it would still be impressive. But with that Primarch being Russ, who is the second most straightforward berserker on this list, it's downright shocking. Magnus lasted longer against Russ and everyone Russ brought with him than Alpharius lasted against Dorn, or Ferrus lasted against Fulgrim the second time they fought. I can't rank him lower than this. I also can't rank him higher. Roid Rage Angron takes the 8th spot simply due to the fact he's an absolute unit. Damon Hood has taken all of his natural fighting ability and cranked it all up to 11, and then added flight in the bonus round for good measure. His initial problems still persist though, and are even worse than before. Angron can no longer think his way out of a wet paper bag, and it shows in his tactics. If someone engages Angron and has a stray thought as to how strategy works, they can actually beat him, which is why Angron is always a good Avengers level threat for the Grey Knights. Konrad Curze is without any question in my head the most terrifying part of this list, and that's why he's at 7. He has above average strength for a Primarch, he's faster than most, and he's an absolutely terrifying strategist, but what makes him scarier to fight than all of what I just said is that he can literally see what's going to happen before it happens. His life is a flat out choose your own adventure puzzle. His issue is he relies, really heavily on it, and thus can take a toll. Konrad Curze goes for style points, able to make an entire Space Marine Legion piss their pants, all the while he's just having himself a grand old time, evading not just 1 but 2 entire legions, and a boatload of other company-sized elements. He essentially made the Ultramarines and Dark Angels scared of the shadows, and if not for a lot of plot elements, he would have had the highest Primarch body count in the Heresy, and afterwards. In fact, he's the only Primarch with the exception of possibly Russ, who almost killed another Primarch before the Heresy even kicked off. Konrad Curze got into it with Dorn, decided his fists were rated E for everyone, and almost beat the Primarch of the Imperial Fist to death. You've got to admit, the Primarch of the Imperial Fist getting beat to death by fists would have been the most ironic kill in Imperial history. Post-nut clarity, Magnus is ranked 6th. Take everything I said about him and, just like Angron, dial it up to 11. He is raw power incarnate with his mind still intact, and that's an extremely dangerous thing, despite the fact he has nipples on his armor. Rounding out my top 5 is End of Heresy Horus, and before everyone starts reeing about how this is wrong, just hear me out. Yes, Horus did kill the Glorious Hawkboy, but only after said Glorious Hawkboy had been fighting for the entire Siege of Terra in the hottest contested zones, period, and he was also fresh off fighting a greater demon of Khorne in the form of Bloodthirster Kabunda, who almost wound up killing Sanguinius. End of Heresy Horus was an absolute monster, don't get me wrong, but I'm fully and utterly convinced that if Sanguinius hadn't literally been face-tanking the entirety of the Chaos Invasion for a month, the Golden Hawkboy would have killed him on the Vengeful Spirit. If he didn't do it already. Some of the rankings on this list could be really close, some of them could be neck and neck, but I am saying without any reservation the top 4 on this list would hard clap anyone further down, with the possible exception of Perturabo. My top 4 starts with the Lion. The Lion is just an absolute Chad with a metric ton of training and talent as well as an instinct for warfare that borders on the outright absurd. The Lion was the only one who did something Konrad Curze couldn't actually predict. He took a sucker punch from Russ and promptly ordered from Amazon an ass-whooping on an overnight delivery that was so brutal the Space Wolves literally developed a ritual around it. The Lion is just an absolute monster of terms of pure martial ability, and the only thing that stops him from being higher is... well, I honestly don't think he could beat Sanguinius, and the others have hacks. Number 3 is the glorious Golden Hawkboy. And now I can hear the salt in the comments section literally going into an apoplectic rage. But it's justified. Sanguinius is to natural ability what to Mortarion is to body odor, and it's just not even worth comparing. He is a prodigy of ass beatings, and everyone not only knows this but fully admits this. Even Horus, coked up with chaos juice, was worried about fighting him. Even Curze didn't know how the fight between them would go. On top of this complete insanity of a unit that Sanguinius is, you also have to add on the exact same kind of precognitive gift that Curze has. Sanguinius would, without question, rename almost every Primarch Fire and then proceed to stomp them out. The list of things that he did during the siege I've covered, but I'll bring them up for the sake of rubbing it in. I've talked about him taking out Kabunda, but before he fought one of the top 10 most powerful creatures in existence, he fought against literally thousands of Astartes for months on end, many times alone. Needless to say that if Horus didn't win after all that, he'd have a lot of explaining to do, and it could fill another 60 books with rationalizations and excuses. Because after all of that, there's no excuse for not collecting a quick W. The number 2 slot goes to Corvus because of what happened when Corvus truly discovered why a flock of crows is called a murder. Yeah, I know he's the Raven Guard Primarch, but crows are funny, and frankly, he's become a living meme at this point. After he chased Lorgar into the Eye of Terror on a one-man mission to whoop that ass, he's completely shed his mortal coil, and now lives as no one intended, as a cloud of blades and birds and shadows, and completely committed to finding and murdering Lorgar. What's his hate boner for Lorgar above anyone else? Does anyone actually care? It's hilarious, and I approve. Lorgar is scared to death of him, and that makes me smile, and I fully encourage him to continue hunting down Lorgar until he kills him. Why is Corvus Combat Evolved on my number 2 for this list? Simple. He lives in the warp. And for almost 10,000 years, there hasn't been a single entity that has stepped to him and taken him out. If you exist in the warp and not a single entity has managed to kill you, you're automatically the blue ribbon winner in the scariest son of a bitch category. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and Vulkan. You guys might have thought I forgot him, but I didn't. There's one clear winner in this, because out of everyone that came before him, there's only one being that could kill all the others. Vulkan. For one simple reason. He just won't stay dead. Vulkan has died more times than my faith in humanity, but he keeps getting back up. If you fill the Primarch like Vulkan with pure crackhead determination to kill another Primarch, then I'm sorry, eventually he's gonna do it, because it doesn't matter if you kill Vulkan 1,000 times. He's still coming. It doesn't matter if you rip out his hearts, incinerate him, blow him up, dismember him, drop him full orbit, crush him. It doesn't matter. Vulkan is still coming. I made a big deal about durability with some of the Primarchs because it is a big deal. Mortarion, if he wasn't literally made to tank damage, would be the only Primarch in the D tier just above Lorgar because he has nothing else. But while Mortarion is highly durable, Vulkan is infinitely durable. And if you pissed off someone with Vulkan's temperament enough to where he chooses fratricide, then you're just gonna get bodied, no matter how many body bags you fill with his body. Vulkan might not be the fastest. He might not be the most martially skilled. He's probably the strongest, but it just doesn't matter. If you take 2 fighters and give one of them literal cheat codes, the likes of which Vulkan has, there's simply nothing any of the Primarchs can actually do. All Vulkan would have to do is attack, die, get up, attack, die, get up, and keep doing that until he lands a meaningful hit. With Vulkan, it would never be if he can kill one of the other Primarchs. It would be how long it actually takes to get it done. And if you're being a prick about it, how many times Vulkan would be killed actually trying to do it.